Hello and welcome to the Refined Strength podcast. I have a very special guest here with me today, Miss Rhea Gayle, IFBB Olympian, Figure Olympian, and you're here in Dallas too. But
Oh, man.
thank you for being on here on the podcast remotely. One day I'll have a studio where I can just invite everyone out, but super excited to have you. So usually I like to start this by just asking tell the listeners just who you are. Whatever that
So,
means to you.
right, I am an athlete first and foremost. I've been doing sport since I was 3.5, starting with gymnastics, then into diving, then into bodybuilding. Um, and that's kind of solely my identity, I guess.
How do you feel about that? Like being when you say like that's my identity,
Mhm.
what does that mean to you?
I guess it's just one of those things I just haven't done, and it's all I've known for myself,
Hmm.
really.
Yeah.
So
How
that's kind
was
of what it comes
your
from.
so you were diving for quite a while. What made you kind of like jump from diving into bodybuilding? Because that's
That
a very
was
different sport.
absolutely, absolutely. So it was, I started diving quite late. Normally people start when they're like 4, 5. I was actually 15.
Okay.
And then I stopped in 2016 due to my mental health. I was just getting blocks. I just wasn't happy anymore. So I was like, I need to take a step back. And then I started training in the gym. And like with diving, we done strength and conditioning, but it was completely different to going into a gym and using machines and everything like that. So I was like, okay, I'll give myself something else to focus on. Um, and a girl that was at the gym competed, and I was like, oh, this could be interesting. Went to a show, and I was like, okay, I'll give this a try. It gives me something to focus on, and the hard work is done leading into a show rather than everything coming down to what happens on the day. So it was a different
Yeah.
kind of pressure and a different kind of focus.
Yeah, because with diving, would you say more of the hard work is on the day, or how would you describe that difference?
So with diving, the hard work is in the training sessions. Everything is very repetitive so that you are nailing dives, getting the technique right. But on the day, everything that you've practiced can go wrong depending on the environment or like a misstep or
Yeah, it's
anything.
very precise,
Whereas,
I would imagine.
yeah, bodybuilding, you can obviously like miss peaks, but your body is still going to be the product of what you've worked on,
Hmm. Yeah,
if that makes
definitely.
sense.
Have you ever missed a peak? Do you feel like?
Um, I wouldn't say missed a peak, but probably 2021 Olympia was more of a my body was just done, but you still have to show up.
Yeah.
And it was after that Olympia that I was like, okay, something's got to change.
What was the big change that you needed?
Coach.
Okay, so you were not with Cuba back then. So what
So
made you?
I started working with Cuba after prejudging of the 2021 Olympia.
Oh, okay. So you changed like right then,
Yes.
like on the day.
Yes, but it was one of those things that Cuba and Megs, because Megs is my best friend since I've been like 12,
Yeah.
have always kind of been there in my preps without being there, if that makes sense. I've
Right.
always kind of, I always go to see them. I'd always be around and I'd be like, kind of, what's going on? How's your prep going? So one of my rituals was always like after prejudging on the show, I would call Megs and we kind of spoke about things. And then from there, it was kind of just organic to
To just
move to
move
Cuba.
on.
Hmm.
Yeah, because she's coached by him as well, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what made you not work with him originally, like instead of your coach before him, if you guys were so close?
I want to say it was just how things mapped out.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a timing, like we had a good run 2020, and then 2021 there was a few things that kind of changed. Um and then that's when I was like, okay.
What was the biggest difference in terms of like when you decided to work with him right after prejudging that like
hmm
do you think it made a difference for finals?
So only the top 10 at the Olympia make finals.
That's right. Yeah. So
Yes, yes.
you
So
didn't make top
it
10
was
that
one where I
year.
was kind of
So
like, I was
yeah.
done. So
Yeah.
yeah, rather
What was the
than,
biggest
okay,
thing that he changed then in your for you going forward then into your off season, into your
mhm,
next season because you competed next. Did you compete in 2022 or did you just do
I did.
23? You
I
did.
did. I
Okay.
done 2022 September.
That's right. So what was the biggest difference you'd say like in how you changed as an athlete because of his coaching?
Mm-hmm. Mindset for one, and two, probably food.
Yeah. What changed about those things?
Mindset. Kuba is a very, as you can tell, like on his Instagram and his YouTube and what he puts out there, he's a very sort of positive person, and he believes in where the mind goes, the body follows, and it's one of the first things he ever told me. Um, and with like how diving ended, my mindset was always is kind of not hit and miss, but there's some things that sometimes I carry over from diving where I'm like, okay, I'm not good enough. This person, da 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 da. So he's
Right.
really kind of helped me elevate my mindset as like, Rhea, you can do this.
Yeah. What was the change in terms of food, do you think?
Just more. It was the
Yeah.
most I've eaten in my life, and it continues like every off season, every prep.
Yeah. It's amazing what, I think a lot of coaches, and I'm sure you see this too because you're a coach, but like I think a lot of
Mhm,
coaches are afraid of feeding athletes
mhm,
more
mhm,
because
mhm,
they don't want them to get fat. They don't want them to
mhm,
like overdo it. And they
mhm.
just don't know. They don't know
Yeah,
like the power of food. And so then you
absolutely.
realize like, well, if I need to grow, which like figure Olympia, you didn't make the top 10, most
Mhm,
likely the need is
mhm,
to grow, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
you got to feed that growth.
Absolutely.
A lot of people think
Absolutely.
it's about like the types of food or drugs
Mhm,
or
mhm,
cardio or whatever, but I
mhm,
think food is
mhm.
underlooked quite a bit.
Yes, yes.
So you talked about your mindset changing a lot in
Mhm,
terms of
mhm,
like going from where you were at and kind of you compared yourself a lot to others and just it wasn't in the right place when you were in
mhm,
diving and some of that would come back.
mhm,
How did that
mhm.
come back as a bodybuilder, like in terms of the comparison game?
It's, I feel like in bodybuilding, it's very natural to compare to your peers
Hmm.
and always kind of get stuck in that game of, but X, Y, and Z has this. Maybe I'll never have this. Am I ever going to be good enough for this? And that's kind of where my mantra of like no more fear, no more doubt comes from, because
Yeah,
as soon as you start harboring those negative thoughts, it's game over.
yeah,
And every every change and every kind of piece of feedback that you get from a judge of, for example, mine is my upper body can't get any bigger, but
mm,
I know that my upper for me my upper body is big, which is why we're trying to streamline. But on somebody else, I'm like, that person has a lot bigger shoulders than me. But rather than comparing myself to X, Y, and Z that is bigger than me and maybe doing better, it's okay, the judges want to see something certain on me. It's okay that I look like this.
yeah. That's a really good point.
Mm,
Yeah, because people will see something that they really like on someone and they think
absolutely.
like, well, if I had that, then
Yes.
I would be perfect. But that's not
Yes.
necessarily true cuz their thing that you like is not going to
Hmm.
look the same on you. So,
Absolutely.
what did you ever feel that way? I'm sure you did, but like, how did you get to a point of not having that fear and doubt when it came to making it to your first Olympia? Like, did you ever think when you first started that you would make it to the Olympia?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think because when I started, my goal was really to just make it to the stage.
Hmm.
And it's kind of my mantra ever since. Like, okay, I've made it to the stage. Whatever happens now is a bonus.
Mm,
So I kind of take each show each year as it comes. Obviously, now setting higher goals for myself. But the first year that I got to the Olympia was like my rookie season. And I was like, I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to do shows. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm just going to go for it. And at that time, it was when Figure had the point system. So obviously, winning, you're in. But if you're in the top three in points, you qualify for the Olympia.
yeah.
So that
And
year,
did you make it via points that year?
yes, yes.
Okay.
I
What
done
year was that?
2019.
That's okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I done 6 shows that year. That was the most shows I've ever done. But I was just like, this feels
You're
amazing.
so
Let's just keep
close.
going.
So you keep
Yeah,
going,
yeah,
right? Yeah. What made you keep going when you kept getting like kind of top twos, top threes, fours? Like what part of you made you just continue? Even though like, you're tired, you're hungry, you don't know if you're
yeah.
gonna make it.
I think it's that what ifs.
Hmm.
I never like to leave the what ifs wide open.
Hmm.
So, yes, I was kind of getting top two, top three, top five. But to me, in itself, that was a win on getting that on a pro stage.
Yeah. Especially your
Competing
rookie
with,
season.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, having Olympians in the lineup like Jess, Nicole Graham, Taryn, Sandra Grajales. So I was kind of just like in awe and just excited to see what could come of it.
Yeah, be up there with them because
Mm-hmm.
you went from looking up to them and they were like at a totally different level than you, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're at their level and you're right next to them on stage,
Yes,
and that's
yes.
like that's a surreal feeling. I know I
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Absolutely.
did not expect that myself this year at all at Texas, so I know what you mean.
Yes.
So that after that rookie season, did you set what goal did you set for yourself?
So that
What was the next step?
was, I'd done the Olympia, and I remember vividly. After prejudging, obviously it was top 10, qualify for finals, and I believe I came 12th or 13th. And to me, that was a win. It was second call outs at the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
And I remember I was getting ready to go and watch finals because it would have been the first time that I would be watching the Olympia. And I kind of took a moment for myself and I was like, one day I'd love to be able to say I made it to finals and be on the big stage because the Olympia prejudging is in the expo. Top 10 finals is in the big theater with the
The
big
venue.
production
Yeah.
and everything like that. So I was like, oh, one day I'd love that. And I kind of set that as like a quiet goal for myself as if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's what I want to work towards. That's where I want to be. That's what I want to experience. So kind of really went to work for that. And then 2020 was my first pro win. And that was like 2020 was the crazy year because of COVID.
Yeah. And you were not in the US yet, correct? Like living
No,
here?
no.
That
So all of the pro shows that I'd done in 2019, I'd done New York, Puerto Rico, Toronto, Chicago, and Norfolk. So I was bouncing back and forth. And then obviously the
yeah.
Olympia.
Yeah.
2020 started with the Arnold's, Ohio, where that was like the right smack bang beginning of COVID.
Yeah. Where
And it was
only
like,
competitors were allowed. Like we didn't even know if you guys would be able to compete because that was my friend Daraja's first Arnold as well.
Yes, yes,
And I
yes,
was about to come out and then I ended up canceling my flight. But I
yes,
remember hearing that like only athletes got to go. So it was just like
yes.
empty.
It was crazy. Only athletes, judges, and photographers. So you could hear all of the clicks of the camera because you've obviously got no one
Wow.
cheering because there's no
Yeah.
one there. It
That
was
would
the
be so
most
surreal.
surreal experience I've ever had. And then 2 weeks later was Arnold's Australia.
And you did both.
So I went to Australia, and I want to say we were 4 days out, and then the world shut down. So it was cancelled. Flights weren't going anywhere. So I was in Australia for 2 months that year.
Oh, shit. Because you couldn't leave.
Couldn't leave.
Dang. So what did you
Yeah.
do? How did that work for your prep?
Luckily, I have family in Melbourne who I was actually staying
Oh,
with. So it was like a home away from home.
that's good.
Um, and because it was very up and down that year of are there going to be shows? Are we going to be able to travel? It was kind of like we kept food in a maintenance ish,
Hmm.
but obviously it's very mentally difficult not knowing when you're
Yeah.
going to be able to go home, not being able to train properly, like just not knowing you've still got that goal of like, I would love to compete. I'd love to make the top 10 one day.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I will try and not let certain situations defeat me, but see what if I continue and what if we make this into something. And I want to say it was May. I was able to come home, still no access to the gym unless you were an elite athlete, which luckily we were deemed as an elite athlete. I had to like travel 2 hours to go to a private gym. And then only we couldn't travel to the US because the UK was one of the red zones, as most of Europe was.
Yeah.
So the only option was to do a competition in Spain. And weirdly, this was the best prep so far out of my career that I'd ever had.
Yeah.
And like the
Why do you
best
think
I'd
that
ever done.
was?
I think it was just the focus
Hmm.
because there was nothing else going on in the world. I was literally go to the gym, be at home for posing clients. And it was just that was it. That's all I
Yeah.
like. And it was the thought of I need to make every single session count because what if gyms
You
are
never
taken away
know
from
when you're
me?
gonna not be able to train. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people during that time, like, it was very one side or the other. You were either
Mhm.
extremely focused and locked
Mhm.
in because you don't feel like you have another option, and you're so focused on
Mhm.
just staying afloat,
Yeah.
and that quietness almost forces you into that. And then there's
Mhm.
the opposite of people just like letting their whole lives just go and
Go. Yeah.
change. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
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 Do you feel like that was ever a danger where you just felt like, fuck this? I don't want to, like, not totally letting yourself go, obviously, but
Yeah.
just deciding to, like, you know what, this is too stressful, not knowing all of the
Mhm.
uncertainty. I
Mhm.
just need to call this into an off season.
I want to say there was moments, and it was actually just before my birthday, um, that year, and it was like, as I said, there was only two shows. There was either go to Korea, which I don't think we could have done anyway, and like I
Yeah.
believe Samson did, and he had to quarantine in there for 2 weeks in a hotel room and everything like that. So I was like, oh, there's Spain. And it was just for my birthday. I was like, do you know what? Why don't I just take the year and see what happens in 2021? But then again, I was like, but,
What if?
and also half of the UK bodybuilding scene was doing Spain. So I was
Oh,
like, that could
yeah,
be
because it
actually
was the only
really
option,
cool.
right?
Yeah. And I was like,
Okay.
Alicante is where I got my pro card. So it'd be nice if I could mentally like level up and get my first pro win here.
Yeah,
So
kind of
that was
felt
kind of
like
like,
you had to do it. Like it was like
yeah,
a this divine thing that
yes,
you need to
yeah,
find out. Yeah.
yeah,
So that's where you got your pro win, right?
yes. That was my first pro win. And it was like the best package at the time, like I said, that I'd ever bought.
Hmm.
And then the journey to the Olympia was like insane because we still
Yeah.
couldn't fly direct. And we were about to go into a lockdown at 4 weeks out of the Olympia. So it was another sort of hurdle that I could have said, do you know what? I've got my pro win. That's great. And I want to say at the time, they said if you couldn't travel, the qualification would, they would grant it for the year
Work for
after.
next year. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I've
You
got
had
two
the out.
options.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, do you know what? No, I want to try and get there. And it was like we were going into another lockdown. We were 4 weeks out of the Olympia. I knew I had to be out of the country for 2 weeks. So I was like telling my coach, I was like, look, we're doing this. These are my plans. I went from London to Spain, Spain to France, and then from France I flew to Cancun, and I was in Cancun for 2 weeks before I then flew to Florida. Yes,
Why did you have to go to Cancun? Is that just like the
because
only place that you were able to fly to?
so it was the only place that wasn't on the red zone because Europe still was,
Oh,
but
okay.
there was like
Yeah.
no direct flight from like London to Paris, so I had to
Mm,
go all around the houses. And then in that time, they announced that the Olympia wasn't going to be in Vegas and they were moving it to Orlando.
right.
So, but that was one of the great Olympias. That Olympia was awesome.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like it's such an experience because you know how much you've been through, but also everyone else,
Absolutely.
like everyone has been
Absolutely.
through
Yeah,
some shit
yeah,
depending on
yeah,
wherever they're at.
yeah.
So, what after that Olympia, that was your
Hmm.
first Olympia. Um or yeah, that was your second Olympia,
Second Olympia,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And that was your first top 10 as well at the
Yes,
Olympia.
yes.
So you set a new goal after that, and you've just been kind of setting these newer goals and like
Hmm.
one
Hmm.
next one and next one.
Hmm. Hmm.
Has there ever been a point where you felt like bodybuilding was just too much and you felt like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore?
Um,
Just
I
because of the
think,
pressure, the work, everything?
yeah, I think probably 2021. I probably didn't realize how like exhausted I was from 2020. And it kind of got to the point where there was so many like things that happened within like the 2021 prep, and I was like, oh god, I don't, maybe this isn't for me.
Hmm.
Um,
Just
but I
because of
still
like
got,
how much was going on and how it was affecting you?
yeah, and just I like still got two pro wins that year, but I don't know, it's something just I didn't feel aligned,
Hmm.
and like the packages I bought just didn't feel like me. And then obviously the Olympia happened, and I was like, maybe I just take some time. But then me being me, I'm like, I love this sport. So I think I do have, I do
You click
sometimes
back
get
into
my,
that love of the sport really
yeah,
quickly. Yeah.
yeah. It doesn't kind of linger to the point where I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. I'm going to take some time off to refocus and realign. It's kind of like a, okay, let's try something new,
Hmm.
which then I did after that Olympia, and
Yeah, I
days
think
get
that's
hard.
yeah, that's something that a lot of people, especially newer competitors, I see they want to do. They like, oh, I need to take some time off before I
Mhm,
decide if I'm
mhm,
going to do this or whatever it is. And
mhm,
there's always this like thought of, I need to take a break and then I'll get my shit together, or like
Mhm.
once things calm down I'll be able to do this. And
Mhm.
I think the reality that you obviously saw in that moment, but the
Mhm.
reality in general, is just that life never calms down. Life is going
Mhm.
to always be moving,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you don't, I think most of the time when you have a sense of misalignment, there's
Mhm.
not actually a need for a bigger break, like
Mhm.
lots of time to find that alignment. The
Yeah,
alignment will happen if you just
absolutely.
make choices one after the other to
Yes.
create that alignment. And that's something
Yes.
that you did. Like, you stepped off that stage and you were like, I need to make a change.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you had known that for a while, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
guessing you knew that there was something off, like you didn't like your
Yeah.
packages as much. So
Yeah.
you'd been thinking about it. It wasn't like a gunshot type
Yes.
reaction.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
How did you feel after them making that decision? Did you feel like instant alignment, or did it take some time?
I felt instant alignment. I was like, okay, this is what I need. Like, I don't feel like I've got a grey cloud over my head. Um, Training was good again. The enjoyment was there again, and it wasn't so much that like I didn't enjoy what I was doing. It was just hard to be excited when things just didn't feel how it needed to. I felt
Yeah.
like I was working in a resistance rather than a
Just kind of
yay.
doing a job.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. At what point did you what were you doing for work before you went like full time into like everything bodybuilding?
So I was, oh God, I've lived a couple of lives. Earlier on in bodybuilding, I was personal training. And then I was
Okay.
like, I need something different because I've always been one that if I'm doing something, or at that time, I was like, I want something that is entirely different. So it's almost like a mental break.
Yeah.
So then I went into being a teacher's assistant with
Okay.
special educational needs kids, and I absolutely loved that.
Hmm.
Um, and then after that, I was like, okay, maybe my calling is being in the gym environment.
Hmm.
So I
What
went
made you
back into
think
this.
that?
It
What made you decide
was
that?
as much as I loved working with those kids, it was very mentally tough.
Yeah, I bet.
Like they were so awesome, but like what they'd go through at like home and stuff, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready because I take a lot of stuff home with me. I'm very empathetic, so
Yeah.
I would like have a day at the school and I'd be at home and I'm like thinking about these kids and like it was just very
Hmm.
heavy. And being one of the youngest in the department, and I was working with ladies that were like 60, 65, and they almost didn't like how the kids would take to me because I was younger and like
Yeah.
open up to me and stuff like that. So I was facing that kind of resistance as well in the office. And I'm like, guys, I'm here just like doing my job. Like,
Yeah.
sorry. So I was like, I'm just going to take a step away from this to give
Hmm.
myself a breather because it was very heavy. Um, and I went back into personal training and then posing
Hmm.
because I really
Has
kind of,
posing has been really the big thing that has driven you forward
yes,
in your career, right?
yes, yes. I love, love posing. And it's one of those things that, again, you can have the best physique on stage, but if you don't show it off, there can be
Yeah.
somebody that completely pips you and takes that spot.
I saw that a lot at nationals. I think nationals is maybe where you see that the most, honestly, because you have such a range of people at nationals. You have like really high level competitors who have probably been competing for years and probably gone to
Yeah,
nationals multiple times.
yeah,
And then you have people who just won their Podunk Town class
Yes.
at their regional
Yeah.
show, and they
Yes.
decided to go to nationals, and they
Yes.
don't know what the fuck they're doing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Men and
Nationals.
women, I see it a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was about to say both men and women. And I was like, this person has an incredible physique, and then they'd pose, and I'm like, they're not showing half of what they have.
Yeah, I remember seeing a classic physique guy who was
Hmm.
just like barely. He was somewhere in the middle during comparisons, and he was
Hmm.
like he had a great back, and he
Yes.
wasn't opening it up at all.
Yes.
Like he
Yeah.
was pinching back, and that was his back pose. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just because he didn't have room, but I feel like it was
Mm.
just because he didn't know how to pose,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like he could have easily jumped up several spots, and those classes are
Hmm.
big at nationals, and that's what people don't always realize is just how
Hmm.
competitive it is when you're up against a bunch of other winners.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
why wouldn't you
Absolutely.
take the time or hire a posing coach?
Absolutely.
What about posing makes you happy and like makes you want to do more of it and spend all day doing it?
I think it's the kind of art form that comes with posing. And that's not necessarily like a routine, but even in figure, just like an individual presentation. We can't get on stage and be like, hey, my name's Rhea, this is my personality, or like, hey, I'm Rachel, this is who I am. You have to show that with body language.
Hmm.
And I think for me, especially like when I first started posing, I was like, I have no idea how to do this. I was horrible. I had no flow. I was horrible because one, being in heels was very alien to me, and two, any kind of was not natural to me. But I can't like publicly speak, for example, terrifies me. But I found that I can do that in the form of posing.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of where, and working with people that almost start off the same as me is like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And like being able to see that person grow and flourish through how they move and the confidence that they get from that is like, I'm almost addicted to that, addicted to seeing that and
Yeah.
addicted to helping people.
Yeah, it's cool seeing that progression. What would you
Mhm.
say is like the best advice you could give to people really struggling with that? Like with just coming into their own body?
Practice. Practice is everything. It may feel like you're a million miles away, but it's like the bodybuilding journey. Who you were last season isn't who you are this season. Same thing with posing. It's going to take the practice to get there. Like in the gym, rep after rep. Same thing with posing. It will come,
Yeah. What are some
but
of
you have to.
the like tips that you give to your posing athletes for just how to make that practice more effective?
So, one of the main things I do and say is one, put your headphones on, put
Hmm.
some music on that you just, doesn't matter who's
Vibe
there,
to.
you're absolutely like vibing and in your zone. And two, to get your confidence up, put that music on and pose in the gym, not
Hmm.
always in the posing room where no one can
Yeah.
see you. Whether it's in between your sets, you're hitting a front pose, or you're hitting a side pose, or afterwards you're still on the gym floor, but you're out of the way in the mirror, you're still kind of exposing yourself to people watching you because that's what's going to be on stage.
Hmm. What do you say to people when they're like really afraid to do that, or they're really worried about just like people judging them in the gym?
If somebody is like super, super like anxious, I won't be like, you need to get out there, but baby steps.
Yeah.
Posing room, start off by like sending me a video because some of my posing clients that I'll have sessions with, they'll even be like, "Oh, Rhea, I was too like afraid to record myself and send you something." So
Hmm.
really kind of scaling it back
Start
and
small. Yeah.
start small, have little wins, or have someone sat in there with you, watching you and recording it.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
Mm-hmm.
think just too with when people are worried about what other people are thinking about them in the gym, you have to realize that everyone is at the in the gym for their own reason, right? They're not there to look at you or judge you or make some sort of a judgment or opinion about you. They might, but what are you going
Mm-hmm.
to do about it? You can't.
Yeah,
There's nothing
yeah,
you can do. And there
absolutely.
anyone judging you for doing something that you love to do or that's important to you in any way, even if it's brand new and if you've never competed before, anyone that's judging you for something like that, that's more of a projection from their insecurities onto you. And
Absolutely.
that's what I try to
Absolutely.
tell people who are scared of just like the gym in general, whether it's
Yeah.
posing in the gym, training, filming their sets, because I do a lot of training
Mhm.
video critiques for my clients. Like
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is there's no reason for you to take their opinions and use them as fact at all,
Absolutely.
because whatever they're
Absolutely.
dealing with, that's why they have those judgments about you. But most of the
Absolutely.
time people just don't have those judgments at all. They're
Mhm.
just all
Mm-mm.
in our heads.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, people in the gym are just focused on what they're doing. And it might feel like you have eyes
Yeah,
on you, but they're probably
they
just
really
getting on
don't.
with what they need to do.
Yeah, we're our own
Mhm.
worst critic and judger, I
Absolutely.
think, a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
What's been so now that you're like far past where you were at like in 2019, do you find
Mhm.
yourself still comparing yourself to others in terms of athletes, coaches, posing coaches, or do you feel like you're past that?
I am, I would say I'm past that. Not in a way of like I'm better than that, but more of I understand what, like I said earlier, like what somebody else has may not look good on me. And
Hmm.
I truly understood that last year at the Texas State when I was talking to Tyler and Attila about like in depth feedback and like what they want to see from me and why. And it was in that moment that I was like, okay, I get it. I can't compare myself to X, Y, and Z because everybody is different. They want to see something different from everybody in order for them to fit the criteria.
Yeah,
So
because our bodies
it's
are
one of
so
those
different, and
absolutely,
that's the beauty of bodybuilding, I think, that a lot of
absolutely.
people see as really frustrating is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they don't understand why they didn't place ahead of this person.
Yeah.
And at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like, yes, it's a subjective sport, but it's subjective because our bodies are different. We have different
Mhm,
insertions, we have different
mhm,
levels of conditioning and how that
mhm.
conditioning looks on us.
Look,
Some people with
exactly.
tattoos versus like having a different skin color and a different suit and how that plays off
Mhm.
of your skin, but also the backdrop. Like there's so
Yeah.
many different aspects that
Yes.
you just you can get overwhelmed by. It's easy
Yes.
to do, but if you really know that you're doing your best and you have every little box checked, then
Hmm.
you you can do better. You can win,
Absolutely.
but you have to like
Absolutely.
follow the feedback and really like take the feedback into consideration and
Yes.
not let your ego get in the way, because I think that's what a lot of people
Absolutely.
do too, is they
Absolutely.
don't ask for feedback or they hear feedback and it manifests in a different way. They just think like I see this a lot in figure. A
Hmm.
lot of figure girls, especially amateur or going to nationals and missing their card, they just say like,
Hmm.
"Well, I just need to get bigger." And so they'll
That.
get bigger everywhere
Yes.
without really like any finesse to it.
Yeah.
And then they show up on stage and they're like, "Oops, I'm women's physique." you know?
Yes. Yes. And that line between figure and women's physique is this.
Mhm.
This. So it really takes getting feedback and not comparing yourself because not only is it the thief of joy in what you're doing, but also it can completely derail your where you want to be and where you want to get to.
Trajectory. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Because once you get to a point where you're unbalanced because you got too big or you went
Mm-hmm.
too hard on whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
then I think what happens a lot of times is like you have a sense of like being lost. Because you're like,
Yes.
well, I was too small before, now I'm too big, or
Yeah.
now I'm unbalanced. And then you start, I think a lot of people start to resent the sport or resent
Yeah.
judges.
Yeah.
And they think that like there's just never going to be a possibility or a reality
Mm-hmm.
where they'll
Mm-hmm.
be rewarded for their physique.
Yeah.
When in reality, like you could be rewarded for your physique if you
Mm-hmm.
listen to the judge's feedback and if you decided to
Absolutely.
really hone in on like what does your physique need, because every
Abs-
physique needs something different, like you said.
Absolutely.
So what would you say is the most unconventional thing you do as a competitor that people don't know about or that people might judge you for or something like that?
Um. Oh gosh. I don't know.
Something that you
I
do that you feel like is a secret ingredient or a secret weapon for you.
probably detaching from what I'm doing.
Hmm.
So obviously, bodybuilding is 24/7, 365. Like, you don't just go into an off season and, like, "Oh, I'm done." That's where the real work takes place. But
Yeah.
I, through all of the sport that I've done, if I am in very intense and I'm very prone to overthinking
Hmm.
to the point of sometimes I'm not having a meltdown, but I just get very stressed over things that I can't control. And I think that's very natural in athletes. So
Hmm.
I will make sure I schedule time to play my Switch or play Sims or just kind of detach rather than make everything. And I know that there's some competitors that also do that, like Daraja at Arizona. We were talking about our Switch and we are like, yes, it's just a nice way to
Just
detach.
like
Some
check
people
out.
read,
Yeah.
yeah, like in my cardio, I will read a book. So obviously I'm focused on what I'm doing, but I'm not, okay, I've got 30 seconds to go or like anything like that. My mind is
Hmm.
here, and it's my sense of calm,
Yeah.
because if things are stressed and I'm overthinking, it negatively impacts what I want my body to do. Which again,
Hmm.
what Kuba says, where your mind goes, your body follows. So I kind of put things in place to make sure that my mind is like, ooh. But I wouldn't
So
say that's
you
unconventional, because there's a lot of competitors that do different things in order to have a sense of calm.
No, but yeah, I think it's something that is overlooked by some because
Mm-hmm.
some will have, like you said, it's common for us to be more
Mm-hmm.
anxious, more stressed when like things are
Mm-hmm.
outside of our control or when there's so
Mm-hmm.
many things to do, or when
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of pressure on the line.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
know I need to get down to this weight or this body fat level, and it's just not
Yeah.
happening yet. And you can stress about that. But I think one of the important parts about like what you do, like what you just described, is that you know yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
know that you are prone to this type of feeling, thought
Mm-hmm.
process, whatever, and you know that's not good for you. And
Yeah.
so being aware enough of that
Mm-hmm.
to realize and like set yourself up for success to avoid
Mm-hmm.
that type of
Mm-hmm.
mental spiral, I think is
Yeah.
really important. And it is like to some it is unconventional because some people
Mm-hmm.
almost are addicted to that feeling of anxiousness. They're addicted
Yes.
to that
Yeah.
feeling of like I need to control everything and like I need to be like
Yeah.
busy, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't you need to be
Yeah.
busy. You just need to
Yeah.
chill the fuck out.
Yes.
And if you can't do that, like you
Mm-hmm.
might make it along the way and be okay and
Mm-hmm.
deal and not have to have these moments of peace, but at some point
Yeah.
it's going to catch up to you. At some point,
Yeah.
you're going to get so stressed because you're so overwhelmed and overworked, and there's so much to
Yeah.
do, so much
Yeah.
pressure that it's going to
Hmm.
get to you and it's going to show
Yeah.
in your physique.
Yeah.
And I see it, some people like they reach that point on show day and they're like, oh my
Yes.
God, I didn't know that there was so much to do on show day. And they're just
Yes.
freaking out. And that's
Yes.
why that self awareness is so key.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
How do you think you
think
develop that self awareness?
so, because of diving, and like I said, I had to kind of step back because of my mental health. It got to a point where that is what was happening.
Mm,
Like, I was letting everything overwhelm me. And like bodybuilding, diving is routine. Everything's a routine. And I just couldn't compartmentalize things. So I was literally overthinking and just in a state of almost fight or flight all the time. And it was just affecting everything I'd done. And I was like, I never mentally want to get back there. And bodybuilding was my kind of saving grace. So I want to do everything I can to keep it that way.
yeah.
So obviously, I've had periods of my career so far where I've kind of gone back to there and I'm like, no, no, no. That self awareness of, okay, we need to put something in
Yeah.
place. Take an hour before you go to bed to decompress, read something, or put your steps somewhere else in the day that you can use that time to put a podcast on and walk somewhere. So, kind of implementing that. And I think that self awareness came from how I left diving.
Yeah. One, just also seeing how those moments, like you just described, how they
Mm-hmm.
help you. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that when people really recognize and like see and verbalize even or write down or talk about
Mm-hmm.
how like, wow, this really helped me. I
Mm-hmm.
succeeded because of this practice, or I
Yes.
feel really good because of
Yes.
this thing that I did. Then you
Mm-hmm.
start to recognize and it starts to become
Mm-hmm.
an easier habit to create.
Yes. Yes.
So, well, thank you
Definitely.
so much for being on. I'm really excited to share this with the listeners. Is there any other piece of advice you would give to sum up your career, your philosophy as an athlete, as a coach, to other athletes listening?
Firstly, I'll say no more fear, no more doubt. If you start doubting yourself and thinking you can't, there is somebody who may not have all the tools that you have that thinks they can, and they're already ahead of you. So,
Yeah,
mindset is everything. And don't be afraid to set your goals too high because starting my career, I never thought that I would be able to place fifth at the Olympia and be sharing the stage with girls that I've looked up to since starting, like Sid. So, sort of never say never, put in the hard work, and yeah, sky's literally the limit.
yeah, agreed. Well, all of Rhea's information will be down in the show notes if you want to book posing with her, coach with her, or just follow along in her journey back to the O this next year. I'm excited to see you. And
Oh,
yeah, thanks so much for coming on, girl.
thank you so much for having me.